Shockwaves coming from the BC legislature today as the government gives itself free rein to react to the U.S. trade war however it wants without asking for permission. For more on this, let's bring in Rob Shaw at the BC legislature. Rob, what a day. Tell us more about this new legislation.
Well, Stacey, an extraordinary bill for extraordinary times. The Premier saying it's enabling legislation to let him tax trucks that are heading to Alaska and lower interprovincial trade borders. It does do that, but it also gives him the power to pretty much change any law he wants for the next 2 years without the approval of the legislature, under the auspices of protecting the BC economy from the U.S. president. So when Donald Trump is in the Oval Office signing an order to do something, the Premier can be in his office signing a cabinet order to do something as well. Here he is today with an explanation.
When there's an emergency like a natural disaster, we have these authorities. This is a human-caused disaster. We can see it coming. We don't know what it is, and we need to be able to respond quickly. If we didn't have this, people would say, "Why didn't you respond?"
These powers reminiscent of the ones during the COVID-19 pandemic. With a few guardrails, they expire after 2 years. They can't be used to force a First Nation or approve a natural resource project without an environmental review. And Cabinet has to table a report publicly twice a year. That is pretty much it, though. The Premier outlining some possible, what he called nightmare scenarios. The Americans cut off power sharing with Canada, and BC has to make an order to keep the lights on, or hit the U.S. back with economic sanctions that can be done at the stroke of a pen without MLAs debating or passing anything in the House. He was unapologetic for what critics say is a power grab.
The government is governing with a very slim majority. At any time, members of the Legislative Assembly could decide that this was overreach, collapse the government, we'd be into an election, and I would stand and tell British Columbians that these authorities, this bill, is to exactly what I'm telling them today. It is to respond to nightmare scenarios that are eminently in the realm of the possible with this president. If we can anticipate a disaster coming, we darn well better be prepared for it. And that's what we're doing with this legislation.
The opposition BC Conservatives calling it an overreach, saying, sure, let's go to an election on this issue. Although I don't think anyone wants that after 5 months. Nonetheless, powers unchecked by the elected House. NDP bill proposing to do that. Here's some more reaction to it.
In extraordinary times, we needed these extraordinary powers. We probably will need these extraordinary powers to respond in a way that helps protect British Columbians.
This gives the government sweeping powers to basically do anything they want with no oversight. We need to make sure that any decisions that they make have the oversight of this legislature, and that's something they're taking away.
So basically, wartime powers, COVID time powers, however you want to describe it, agility for the government to respond to what the Premier calls this nightmare scenario. Also the first time we've heard the Premier raise the idea of a snap election coming after Ontario's Premier held one there during this tariff threat and consolidated his majority. I'm sure that's going to fuel speculation now, Stacey, on top of everything else, whether this government wants to go to an early election. An extraordinary bit of legislation here. The legislature will listen to some more debate about it and bring you the latest.